Shalom to the elect of Israel, to the hopefully elect of Israel, you Hebrew Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, West Indian, and Haitians. Got to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shah, the Most High, the Heavenly Father. His name is Yahweh, not Yahweh, not Jehovah, not Elohim, not God, not Allah, okay? Not Ahaya, it's Yahweh. His only begotten son name is Yahweh Shai. Not Yahshua, not Yeshua, not Jesus Christos, not Jesus Christ, not Serapis Christus, not Yeshaya. It's Yahweh Shai. Yahweh, Bahashim Yahweh Shai. So we got to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim Yahweh Shai, Bahashim Rikah Quadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, who teach well, and a sincere salutation to all the ark and pushing this truth and believing this truth throughout the four winds of the earth, the entire world, waking up the hopeful elect. And shalom to the Akwaf who are listening and learning, the few sisters who are listening and learning. I'm Isaiah from the GMS Orlando camp, coming at you another lesson in truth, facts, faith, and edification, another daily edification. Lord's willing, this be edifying. Update on death and destruction.
Good evening. We have known all along this was going to get worse, especially as more people are tested, and it certainly has. In some states and cities, the running tally of people infected by coronavirus has doubled, over 3,600 here in New York City alone. And as each day passes, some of the things we thought we knew about this virus have changed, like the risk to younger patients. A lot of what we're going to tell you tonight may feel overwhelming, but there is progress on some fronts, including the search for treatments. Our team is ready to go with the latest. We start with Miguel Almaguer.
Tonight inside intensive care units across the country, the CDC says nearly half of all coronavirus patients fighting for their lives are younger than 65. While often deadly for the elderly, the virus is now taking more lives of those who are not senior citizens. The young not only catching the illness at higher and higher rates, but also spreading it.
Oh, on the worst day, it was. It was a 10. It was rough.
Matt Schulte has had the virus for over a week.
It feels like my lungs are half fluid in them. The air feels thin, and it just feels very heavy on my chest.
As officials in Washington state scramble to build a 200-bed hospital on a soccer field, the number of coronavirus cases nationwide is hitting yet another milestone, climbing to over 13,000. More than half the cases in the country come from just 10 counties across 3 states, New York, Washington, and California.
The number of test positives is increasing.
Today at the White House, a call for social media influencers to warn the young about the virus. The governor of Maryland with a more pointed message amid spring break scenes like these.
If you are engaged in this type of activity, you are in violation of state law, and you are endangering the lives of your fellow Marylanders.
With the State Department making an unprecedented move, telling Americans not to travel abroad, Carnival Cruise Lines is offering their ships to serve as floating hospitals to relieve stress on a burdened onshore medical system. Now, the first 2 members of Congress, Mario Diaz-Balart and Ben McAdams, have tested positive, while in New Jersey, so have 7 members of the Fusco family. 73-year-old Grace died just hours after her son and 5 days after her daughter. Cases in neighboring New York are skyrocketing.
Nobody can tell you when this is going to end. Nobody can say 2 months, 4 months, 9 months. Nobody.
Amid ghostly scenes like this around Boston, as Americans heed warnings to stay away from others, the U.S. Census is suspending field operations, while the CDC suggested live streaming funerals to avoid crowds. The National Guard now deployed to over half the country.
With COVID-19, it's like we have 54 separate hurricanes in every state, territory, and the District of Columbia.
Tonight, our nation fighting the virus and fear as both spread across the country.
In a letter to the president, the governor of California now says over the next 8 weeks,
He expects more than half of California will become infected with the coronavirus. That's more than 25.5 million people, a staggering number. And Lester, many are worried, could other states have similar projections?
All right, Miguel, thank you. Let's turn to the front lines of the pandemic and the people we're going to lean on through this crisis. The hospitals, the medical staff, they're running short on supplies. And while a vaccine may be more than a year away, the president says he's trying to fast-track 2 potential treatments. Here's Tom Costello.
On hospital campuses across the country, triage tents now help manage the crush of people fearing they've got COVID-19. Any needing hospitalization are isolated. Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston has set aside an entire COVID wing. Doctors and nurses in full protective gear.
We're spending up to 2 hours at a time in these rooms with all of the equipment on, which is very difficult. You can't really breathe that well, and it's very hot, so you get very exhausted wearing it.
Tonight, the American Hospital Association says it needs $100 billion immediately to deal with the emergency, as med centers nationwide tell staff to conserve masks.
In some cases where it's as safe as possible to do so, actually reusing those. And then for other things like respirator hoods and goggles, we are being told to save those so that they can be cleaned and reused later.
The government promises more are coming as the CDC recommends making masks out of scarves and bandanas. Also today, the president said 2 drugs already approved for other purposes are under review for COVID-19 patients. Chloroquine, a malaria drug, and remdesivir.
It's going to be very exciting. I think it could be a game changer.
But the drugs are not yet approved for COVID-19 and may not work. Remdesivir, originally designed for Ebola, may work better on coronavirus. Chris Kane was put on the experimental drug in a Washington state ER and says he saw fast results.
Within 48 hours, I was feeling a lot better. But I got a 5-day dose of it, and then I got home from the hospital over the weekend. So
the good news, most people who contract the virus will have mild to moderate symptoms and can treat themselves at home.
It's not much more than getting rest, staying hydrated. If you have a fever, maybe taking, medication for the fever like acetaminophen. But the most important thing is really to practice social distancing.
Meanwhile, with young people ignoring pleas to stay inside, the resident physicians at Abbott Northwestern Hospital in Minneapolis have their own message.
We stay at work. For you. You stay at home for us.
Tonight, the Massachusetts Medical Society says the situation there is dire. Not enough protective equipment for doctors, nurses, and technicians on the front lines of the pandemic. Lester?
All right, Tom, thanks for that reality check. A lot of people do get through this. Also breaking tonight, the State Department warning Americans not to travel overseas, and stranded Americans want to come home. Here's Andrea Mitchell.
Countries close their borders. Travelers, including thousands of Americans, are stranded, struggling to find a way back to the U.S. The State Department tonight raising its global travel advisory to its highest level, telling Americans who live in the U.S. not to travel abroad, and U.S. citizens living overseas to stay put. Among those trying to get home, hundreds of Americans in Peru, which closed its borders Monday. Commercial flights are not an option. 19-year-old Aiden Earhart and her friends are at a hotel outside of Lima.
It could be a lot worse, and I think like our whole group attitude is that we're very thankful for the resources we do have.
Aiden's father, a Boston doctor.
We'd love to have them all back with us and safely sound back here in the U.S.
President Trump saying the military is working to bring them home.
We have a group of young people in Peru, and we're working on taking care of that with the military.
But embassies and consulates are working with skeletal staffs. In Morocco, all the U.S. ambassador could do was post a video today.
We are exploring all options.
Small comfort for travelers.
It's scary for Americans because we don't know where we're going. We don't know if we're getting home.
Tonight, the U.S. Embassy in Peru sent messages for people to sign up for commercial flights, but no sign yet that the border is reopening. Lester?
Andrea Mitchell tonight, thank you. And tonight, lawmakers are hashing out that massive economic aid package that could top $1 trillion. and offering some new details about those checks that would go to Americans. Here's Peter Alexander with that.
150,000.
President Trump tonight at FEMA.
Feel free to call me, the vice president, anybody at the table.
Pressed by governors on teleconference for help, including for devastated industries in their states, like in Nevada.
Unfortunately, had to shut down the Strip in Las Vegas, and tens of thousands of hospitality workers have been displaced.
The president earlier responding to bipartisan critics demanding to know why he has not used the Defense Production Act a day after invoking the law that would compel private companies to manufacture life-saving supplies like ventilators.
The governors are supposed to be doing a lot of this work. Federal government's not supposed to be out there buying vast amounts of items and then shipping. You know, we're not a shipping clerk.
The White House highlighting one of the ways it stepped up, waiving liabilities so U.S. manufacturers can now send millions of new industrial masks meant for construction sites to be used in hospitals. President Trump overnight signing a relief package that provides paid sick leave and unemployment benefits to those affected by the pandemic, as well as free testing. And tonight, the president saying he's open to barring companies that receive federal aid from using it for executive bonuses or to buy back their own stock.
Well, we don't want that. It's very hard to tell them not to, but I would tell them not to.
And tonight, the Senate is unveiling its proposal for those checks to Americans. As an example, anyone making $75,000 or less would get $1,200, and qualifying families would get $500 per child. Lester?
A lot of folks could really use that. All right, Peter, thank you. The impact on this pandemic on American business is growing more devastating. Unemployment claims, not surprisingly, are up, and now a new warning that a third of restaurant jobs could be lost in all this. Gabe Gutierrez has more.
Tonight, Uber driver Yasser Hussein is looking for work. He says business is down 90%.
It's scary because you don't know what you're going to do in the next days.
Across the country, workers in limbo are sounding the alarm.
We're asking you, please don't forget about us. We need your support.
The National Restaurant Association is predicting a loss of $225 billion over the next 3 months if the crisis continues, meaning 5 to 7 million jobs could be slashed. That's a third of the total restaurant jobs in the U.S. In Austin, Texas, already reeling from the cancellation of the massive South by Southwest festival, audio engineer Richard Bonoy is stunned.
It's very uncomfortable. It's a little depressing.
The Labor Department says last week it had 281,000 claims for unemployment insurance, a one-third increase from the week before. Carrie Rydell opened her cafe in Kentucky just 10 months ago. Now she's drastically cut hours for some of her employees.
We had people coming in to use our Wi-Fi to file unemployment here in a cafe. And so holding on to my employees and for them to see that, it's very alarming.
Some places are hiring. This supply warehouse for the grocery store chain ShopRite.
I think it's a game, man. This ain't no game, man.
Prior to this was Sandy.
But the empty streets are already taking their toll. How long do you plan to stay open?
As long as possible.
In Brooklyn, New York, this barbershop is fighting to stay alive in the age of social distancing. This business has been in Ralph Rubinoff's family for 40 years.
It's very difficult.
This Zephaniah 3 and 5. The just Yahweh is in the midst thereof. He would not do iniquity. Every morning doeth he bring his judgment to light. He faileth not, but the unjust knoweth no shame. I have cut off the nations. Their towers are desolate. I made their streets waste, that none passeth by. Their cities are destroyed, so that there is no man, that there is none inhabitant, man. The Lord is destroying everything, man. I said, surely thou wilt fear me. Thou wilt receive instruction. So their dwelling should not be cut off. Talking about the elect of Israel. Howsoever I punished them, but they rose early and corrupted all their doings. Hey, the Lord is showing you who is the power, who is the omnipotent, okay?
Difficult to see some of the employees have families and they're suffering because there is no work.
The Small Business Administration is now offering emergency loans, and lawmakers are considering expanding that program. Some entrepreneurs say they might run out of money first.
Yeah,
Oh, they're going to run out of money.
A&B ABC News fans, thanks for checking.
They gonna run out of money. That's facts, man. This thing is serious, man.
From the world headquarters of RT America in our nation's capital, this is the news with Rick Sanchez.
And hello again, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez. Tonight, Bank of America's economists are making it official. We are in a recession. Here is the quote. It reads as such: we are officially declaring that the economy has fallen into a recession, joining the rest of the world, and it is a deep plunge. Jobs will be lost, wealth will be destroyed, and confidence will be depressed. Two things. Most of the economists...
Hey, that's what the Lord say in Isaiah 35. In verse 3, it reads, strengthen ye the weak hands, and confirm the feeble knees, so say to them that are of a fearful heart, be strong, fear not, behold, your power, Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushua, will come with vengeance, even Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushua, with a recompense. He will come and save you. We supposed to be confirming and strengthening the weak hand and feeble knees, man. Because these times is finna get worse.
that we have spoken with over the past year, and many of the indicators that we have shown very well predicted that we would have a recession by the end of this year, with or without the coronavirus. It's important for you to know that. Obviously, the virus has both hastened it and likely intensified it. The other point to be made on this topic is that we should guard ourselves against predictions from banks like BOA, who will most likely use this as opportunity to try to get more of our tax-funded bailout money. Case in point, listen to what else Bank of America said in this very same statement. Look at this. When it comes to the policy response, there should be no upper bound for the size of the stimulus in our view. Translation: keep printing money because we are too big to fail. Staying with what is going on with the world economy, there is some good news as markets today, for the first time in 2 weeks, seem less volatile. For example, on Wall Street, instead of 1,000-point swings, the market has been relatively tame today, in the hundreds, let's say. But on Main Street and in homes all over America, fear and uncertainty continues to prevail. There are still not enough tests, not enough testing locations, not enough awareness as to what exactly we should do if we feel ill, for example. The White House says it hopes to provide more testing facilities, including drive-through facilities, but even those drive-through facilities say they can't start until they get the tests, the kits, to be able to test people. And if you listen to this, if you go to the CDC website like we did, check this out. This is the CD website. Here's the instructions that they're offering Americans. Stay home, stay in touch with your doctor, and avoid public transportation. Well, listen, that's great advice. That's not exactly an example of clarity and exactness, right? And then there's the issue of social distancing that all Americans are now grappling with in their homes, in their job sites, in their offices, and just about every place in between. What does that mean? And what are the long-range and long-term implications of this social distancing? We are going to be drilling down on all of this right here on the News with Rick Sanchez, where we remain committed to the idea that it really is time to do news again. All right, here's the list of the questions we think you're going to be asking tomorrow after watching our coverage throughout the course of the day. What will happen when we go for months fearing contact with each other? Are we going to change? Should nations like the United States lift sanctions during the coronavirus? That's an important question. And what's Dennis Miller's take on the coronavirus? You're going to hear it for yourself. Let's begin with the very latest on the virus itself. Italy continues reporting a record number of deaths. In fact, the big news is they've just overtaken China. Spain also reporting a spike today in its death toll. Iran now confirming that it too is having a real tough time coping with the spread and the death toll. China meanwhile, reporting that its numbers are finally going in the other direction. In fact, today, it is reporting no new cases. No new cases in China today, thus far, by the way. We will keep our fingers crossed. As for the United States, yesterday, for us here living in the good old USA, worst day yet. Worst day yet. More than 2,300 cases reported. And folks, this is just between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. 2,300 between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. As we do every day, let's get over to the Global Coronavirus Update Desk so Michelle can bring us up to date on the very latest information as it's coming in. Michelle, start us off. What do you got?
Rick, before I get to anything else, the Trump administration announced today that the FDA will begin investigating whether an existing drug for malaria can also be used to treat COVID-19. The drug is called chloroquine and has been used to treat malaria since the 40s. Now, even though malaria is a disease caused by a parasite and COVID-19 is not, lab studies have been showing that the drug can prevent and treat SARS, which is a close cousin of COVID-19. So,
by the way, Michelle, that's interesting you're reporting that. We checked with Dr. Shi Chen, the expert at Yale University, who is one of the most renowned experts on public health policy from a global perspective. We asked him about this report that you just gave us, this new drug that's used for malaria that may work on coronavirus. Here's what he said. I'm going to read his quote. He says the malaria treatment has the potential to treat COVID-19 patients, and yes, it does give us hope. However, he goes on to say, like the cases of Gilead's Ebola treatment drug and other HIV drugs, any use of these drugs that deviates from intended function must be approved by the FDA and will require clinical trials. I think what he's saying is not so fast, that we're going to have to slow down with this, as you read his words there, that essentially we will probably have to wait the required time, which sometimes is between 9 months to a year before we can actually give this to people. So there's the update from Shi Chen. Michelle, back to you.
Yeah, I mean, Rick, it would be great news for those infected, but maybe some bad news for some of these vaccine manufacturers. But back to our global updates. Let's start by zeroing in on Hong Kong. Starting today, Hong Kong is putting all people who have been outside the city on a mandatory 2-week quarantine. If you're coming from a high-risk place, Italy, South Korea, you have to stay in a quarantine center. But if you're coming from anywhere else, you have to self-quarantine. So here's how they're making sure you're actually doing that. You're self-quarantining. Take a look. It's being called medical surveillance. What you're looking at is a wristband that tracks people's movements. Everyone coming into Hong Kong will get one of these electronic wristbands, regardless of whether or not they're a Hong Kong resident. The travelers are required to wear these.
Next step to the chip over there in Hong Kong, man.
That makes sure they actually are in isolation for those 14 days. Under Hong Kong law, people who violate this kind of quarantine can be subject to an up to $640 fine or a 6-month prison sentence. Now let's go to Iraq, where the capital.
That's the RFID microchip.
I have some footage that may get
getting close.
New normal here in the capital. This is Baghdad, and it looks eerily quiet according to the locals on the ground. Now, even though Iraq has less than 200 confirmed cases as of now, all restaurants and public spaces shut down. As you can see, the streets are mostly empty, just a few cars on the move, and the curfew is expected to last until March 24th. Now let me show you Peru, which is another example of deserted streets, this time in Lima. Again, the government has imposed a curfew to prevent the spread of the virus. Private cars banned from the roads, and people are only allowed to leave their homes to buy food, buy medicine, or visit the bank. And all borders are closed, which, by the way, has left nearly 300 U.S. citizens stranded there. They say the quarantine caught them by surprise, and there was really no time to get out. Okay, let's go over to Italy, the European country with the most confirmed cases so far, and by some projections, actually expected to surpass China in terms of confirmed cases.
Isaiah 24 and verse 10. The city of confusion is broken down, which is first and foremost Babylon the Great, and every other neighboring city around it, man, and country. The city of confusion is broken down. Every house is shut up, man. We looking at this right now, man. The city of confusion is broken down. Every house is shut up that no man may come in. There is a crying for wine in the streets. All joy is darkened. The mirth of the land is gone, man. Hey, we were downtown prophesying last night, man. Hey, it was shut down. Shut down, man. There's no mirth in the land no more, man. It's gone. For how long, it doesn't matter, man. These prophecies are speaking, man. And the city is left desolation, and the gate is smitten with destruction, man.
They say it's projected to. At this point, Italy, of course, still has less than China. But in terms of where they are in their progression, they're, of course, farther behind China.
Okay.
So let's take a look at this footage from Milan. This shows what Italy is doing in the streets while the country is on lockdown. The company that's supplying this disinfectant says that their way of disinfecting is more effective than the government's. The company's manager was actually quoted saying that the municipality of Milan uses an antibacterial substance that infects but can be reinfected by a sick person within hours. And he says that his substance leaves surfaces self-sterilizing for up to 2 years. Now, to close out, a really quick note on China. In China, as you mentioned earlier in this program, a milestone, right? Today, China is reporting no new local infections for the first time in 3 months. So what that means is that all new cases reported today were people who had come to China from somewhere else. So let's take a look at what China is doing now that it seems it's been through the worst of this outbreak. These are Chinese medical personnel who have just arrived in Italy. This is the first wave of what's expected to be 300 Chinese doctors being sent there, and they brought with them 400,000 protective masks. This comes after China sent a plane full of medical supplies via the Italian Red Cross to Rome last week. And in fact, one of these doctors was quoted saying that in terms of the level of severity between Wuhan, China, and Italy right now, it's about the same.
That's nice. That's nice to see countries coming together and trying to help each other. It's a good sign. Michelle, good reporting as usual. Keep us up to date on all the changes as they come in.
Thank you.
As the entire world, interestingly enough, grapples with the coronavirus, and countries are doing everything that they possibly can to help in this situation, it now appears that we could go on for months dealing with the new normal of limited social contact. The buzzwords, by the way, for this is social distancing. But are we, think about this, are we as human beings designed for this? Aren't we, as Aristotle once said, naturally created to be social animals? We're being told right now not to talk to each other too closely, to stay 3 feet apart, not to touch each other. What kind of implications is that going to have on us? Short-term or long-term? Joining us now, Norman Freed. He's a clinical psychologist. He's the right guy to talk to on a subject like this. Dr. Freed, what is your take on this? Is there a long-term implication if we go for months afraid to even come near each other?
Well, first of all, Rick, I want to thank you for that question. And there is always a long-term effect on anything that has to do with sanctioning our human behavior. But I want to be very clear that social distancing does not mean that we're not connecting through our voices and that we're not communicating. So we are not touching. We are 2 meters apart. We are being very careful with our own personal boundaries and space, but we are still using our words and our eyes to connect with one another, and we're being required now to speak in a way that we didn't before. A hug is being replaced by a statement of truth. A handshake is being replaced by a glance or a certain gaze. And so I don't want anyone to think that social distancing is going to stop us from having connection with one another. We are connected and must maintain great connection, but we do it with physical distance, not emotional distance.
But here's the problem, doctor, and here's what I'm sensing everywhere. Fear. Fear of the other person and what they may have that I don't have. And
that's what they pushing, man. They're pushing fear, man. Hey, but second Timothy 1:7, what the Lord say? He did not give the elect, the hopefully elect, the spirit of fear, man. Okay, but of power and of love and a sound mind, man. Okay? Let's get on this right here.
Time to talking to some people in and out of our business who we think are very important. Joining us now from New York, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Chris Hedges, who also, as you know, hosts On Contact. Also with us is Lee Kim. He is the host of Redacted Tonight. Brent DeBoer is the producer and co-host of Boom Bust here on RT America. And Chris Stacos, is RT's sports machine. And he rounds out our panel. Let's start in New York with Chris Hedges. Mr. Hedges, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being worried, 10 being optimistic, where are you on this?
I mean, there are so many structural deficiencies within the United States that I'm pretty worried. I don't know, 2, 3, something. I'm pretty worried.
And is the big concern for you the fact that we just haven't gotten the right infrastructure to the right places to be able to deal with this, i.e., test kits?
Yeah, but that's symptomatic of the breakdown of the infrastructure throughout the country. I mean, you take the train, as I do, Rick, between New York and Washington. It's like, I used to live in Bolivia. I don't want to diss Bolivia. It's a great country. But, I used to, when I lived in Paris, I could go to Lyon a few hours at 170 miles an hour. But the whole infrastructure is going, and that includes, of course, the healthcare structure. We have huge segments of the population that are outside the healthcare structure. 8 million uninsured. Then you have 2.3 million trapped in prisons. These are concentrated areas where this virus can easily spread, a huge homeless population. And you, I think, rightly at the top of the newscast brought up Bank of America, which was the largest recipient of taxpayer money in 2008, 2009 after Citigroup. And they're using this crisis to do the same thing. They got a bailout. I'm talking about Bank of America Corp of $20 billion. They had a guarantee of almost $100 billion for potential losses, and that's after TARP had given them $25 billion. So you are right to highlight that the kind of predators or the parasites have come back, so yeah, I mean, I think we have as many people know, there's going to be a terrible shortage of hospital beds. People are going to have to triage as they do in Italy, essentially with a shortage of ventilators. I mean, on and on and on. We're just not equipped, and the testing kits are just an indication of how decayed the infrastructure has become in the name of austerity and in the concentration of wealth in the hands of this oligarchic and corporate elite that has devastated so much of the country. So we're far more vulnerable because of that. This virus is going to be more effective in terms of spreading throughout the population. I mean, go and look at Singapore, which is a police state, but they crushed it. I mean, they crushed it quickly because they actually have an infrastructure that works.
Lee Camp, is he right? I mean, are we at the point where it's not about what is happening now as a result of the coronavirus, but more having to do with what we failed to do prior to the coronavirus?
Yeah, absolutely. All of these structures have atrophied, and they're just not there anymore. I mean, the community isn't there, and so much of our community, anything that was for the common good, has been gutted. And actually, we've seen this in piecemeal in certain areas in our country. After Katrina, New Orleans, Puerto Rico, did they rebound instantly? No. Were we there instantly to fix it and help people? No. We didn't have the infrastructure set up to really get in and help people, because it all comes down to profit motive. If profit's not there, I mean, they say that they're having trouble getting new ventilators made, respirators, because there's not a lot of profit to make all of those, and then a year from now you don't need them anymore. So the companies don't even want to do it.
But there's a place for profit, and there's a place for the government to step in and make sure people are taken care of prior to profit or outside of profit, right? You're not saying
that's the idea of government, but the problem is we've had so many, they like Chris said, the oligarchs have gone in there and gutted the things that were the government at its best.
Well, and I was going to say, to your point about ventilators, too, we're seeing now that because we have this amazing shortage, that now the government, like Chris said also on bailouts as well, there are people asking for bailouts, and now the government is, of course, asking businesses who are shutting down operations, they're asking them, hey, can you make ventilators? Can you make masks? Can you make these supplies? We never thought about this before, but now we think about it today when it's, 3, 4, 5 months too late to start working on this?
Let's talk a little bit about
facts,
that,
man.
since you mentioned it. Just before I came out on here to go on the air, I just read an update that the theaters in the United States now are asking for a bailout. Cruise ship industry is asking for a bailout. The banks are asking for a bailout. The airlines are asking for a bailout. Is this the most equitable way of dealing with this crisis, just to throw money at all of these industries, guys?
And I want to point out about this is, in the U.S., we're really only 3 weeks into this pandemic at the most, right? So they've had a financial strain, and they're already asking the government. They're not even letting it play out to see where we are. So their margins were so thin in a business term here, so thin that they said, "Oh, we're 3 weeks, we're done. We can't." AMC, Regal Cinemas, Princess Cruise Lines, Delta. These companies have been around for years and years and years,
And it would not surprise me, just to bring Steve into the conversation, if pretty soon some of these billionaire owners of teams like the whatever, every NFL and NBA team is going to say, hey, we want a piece of that too.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a big thing. And to go back to the point where you said we weren't prepared for this and we're kind of doing it in piecemeal, I was thinking about how
They can never have enough, man.
being tested and getting
They belly cannot be filled. The devil, man.
because they go through a private enterprise, not a public health official, so the average person can't get the test. But you're seeing
How these billionaire companies need bailouts.
shows how unprepared we were as a country for this.
40% of the
The
Americans
greed of these devils, man. They can never have enough.
to go to and don't have a primary care physician because we're one of the few countries on earth that doesn't have a system that allows them to have a pinpoint person that they can go to, and that is now showing its face, as Chris Hedges alluded to a little while ago.
See, I'm just a D celebrity, so I can't get the test if I wanted to. I'm not up there high enough.
But there really is a question about where do we get this test?
Yeah, and that's our officials have failed us. I mean, they have absolutely failed us. Not the Trump administration. I mean, he is perfectly suited to be a catastrophe in this case because it's all about himself. It's narcissism and greed, and so he doesn't even want to learn about this stuff. Now he's sort of being forced to. But that's, it's not just him. These things have been gutted for years and years. This is not just a Trump fiasco. This is a ongoing destruction of anything that was built for, public schools, public health care. It's all been gutted, and now we're seeing that they're not ready for a catastrophe. We have an entire system based on consumption, based on economic system, based on everybody buying things they don't need, dog sweaters and avocado toast for $18. And when you have that, and it gets undermined by closing all the restaurants, you can't repair it easily.
Let me bring Chris Hedges back into the conversation. Chris, I'm wondering, has the media played its part in this? Have they done a good job, especially when it comes to their coverage? I mentioned earlier that I noticed the New York Times is concentrating its coverage on being critical of China, but they're nice when it comes to Italy, for example.
I was just watching a short little a ad with this company it's called Epoch Times, and they were saying how 90% of the media, 90% of the news that we watch from these media sites, they are all false, man. 90% of the media is lies, man. And he said it's controlled by, he said 6 companies. 6 companies control these medias, man. Okay? 6, man. And 90% of it is lies, man.
Fox News is bashing China every single night on the air. CNN is going after Russia. Is this the time to be playing that game?
Well, that's a long game. I spent 20 years overseas, mostly covering conflicts. When I covered the war in Yugoslavia, and let's face it, because they were white, there was a kind of empathy. I think this is what you're alluding to. Whereas when I covered the conflict in the Middle East, or when they were covering the conflict in Latin America, covered the war in Salvador for 5 years, it's just a kind of insidious form of racism that creeps into the media, where white lives matter more. That famous National Lampoon headline, a parody of the New York Times, tidal wave or tsunami hits Japan, and the next headline is Jones's vacation ruined, and then below that in small print is 10,000 Japanese dead. So that's kind of what we're watching. That's always been part of the media, was very much part of my own coverage. Confronting that kind of implicit idea that people of color who die are just worth less than white people. I just want to go back to that bailout, because what the whole financial response by the oligarchic elite and the Trump administration, I just don't see much division there between the Democrats and the Republicans on this, is a disaster. The idea of giving $1,000 to American citizens, well, we know exactly where that's going to go, and it's going to go to back to the credit card companies or the student loan companies or the car payments.
Right.
So it's going to get sucked right back up into the corporate elite. We have, in real terms, unemployment of 10% when you count people.
Psalm 64 and 8. They should make their own tongue to fall upon themselves, man.
Jobs that want full-time jobs. That number is going to easily double, is in the process of doubling as we speak. So unless the federal government, which has shown no signs of doing, steps in to do a kind of new deal. Remember, Franklin Roosevelt created 12 million jobs at the Depression. You are going to further consolidate the wealth of this narrow, tiny oligarchic elite. And really, we're going to stop using the word recession and very quickly start using the word depression. Because as this virus, if it continues for the length of time that most medical experts say it will continue, you're going to have a lot of people in deep financial distress. I mean, I already see it now with all the restaurants. I live in Princeton are closed, which is where I am, and all of the Latino workers are completely out of a job, but remember, they don't have health insurance. So there's another whole 11 million of them estimated undocumented workers in this country who aren't getting tested. I mean, because of the breakdown of society, we have built into the system these large segments of the population that are going to be deeply affected because they won't get proper health care by this virus, making potentially our pandemic much worse than other countries.
And that's what it is, man. Hey, we under the curses, man. Negro, Latino, Native Americans are under the curses, man. Hey, but you know what? All these things is happening for you Negro, Latinos, and Native Americans, man. And the Lord said he made the world for your sakes. And for your sakes, hey, the Lord gonna jack 2/3 up, and for the mercy of Yahweh Shema Shah, he's gonna save the elect, man, the remnant.
For the very first time, there is a reprieve on Wall Street. Investors may finally be showing signs of buying into the rescue package being offered by the Fed. And it's some rescue package. And we're told there's even more to come. Joining us now is Richard Wolff, Professor Emeritus of Economics at UMass Amherst. What sayeth you about how much the Fed has thus far piled on to rescue Wall Street, Professor?
Well, at the risk of offending somebody, let me be as honest with you as you try to be on your program, which is one of the virtues of it. The Fed a week and a half ago lowered interest rates by 50%. The day afterwards, the stock market tanked. Then last Sunday, the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates and announced even more billions of money injected into the economy, and we all know what happened then. So let's be real honest. The reaction to the Federal Reserve has been, in my judgment, the right one. Namely, this is not a solution, but it is a sign of how desperate the situation really is. And we have on Wall Street something called the dead cat bounce. After a particularly horrific day or two or three, the stock market comes back as people we call bottom feeders pick up stocks at depressed prices, hoping that the turning point has been achieved. Those who did that over the last couple of weeks are very sorry that they did it. We are in a situation for which no precedent exists. We have a crash. We have millions of people losing their jobs, losing their incomes, deciding to stay at home, to travel nowhere, and we have a level of debt linking those people who have no income to every bank, to every pension fund, and this is a network presaging a downturn of the sort where you have to go back to the 1930s, and even that didn't happen as fast as what the last 10 days have shown us. So I cannot, if I'm going to be honest with you, tell you anything other than we are in a very bad situation because having failed to prepare for the virus, we are now seeing the economic downturn consequent upon that failure.
and we're going to keep printing money and keep doing whatever we have to do to bail out companies, even though in some cases they're companies that already received money from another bailout about a decade ago, and what they did with much of that revenue is they stuffed it in their pocket by doing stock buybacks. Should there be some kind of policy that says, no, we're not going to bail out companies where the CEOs stuck all the money in their pocket because they're just going to continue to do that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's part of understanding that we live in an economic system that puts priority on making profits now. And every successful broker, every successful CEO is successful, in quotations, because he or she is good at doing that. And if you do that, you take steps that are socially absurd. For example, we should have stockpiled ventilators. We didn't. We should have produced test kits. We didn't. And by the way, we should have, because viruses have been with us as long as there's a human race. They come every few years. They are occasionally devastating, like the last one, the Spanish flu back in 1916, and so on. We know there's a problem. And if the private profit motive doesn't get solutions preparing for those problems, then some other system has to be turned to. We don't dare ask, let alone debate those questions. Therefore, it's a very serious disaster. Apple Computer bought back $316 billion of its shares to boost the price. That's a serious misallocation of investment.
And they're going to continue to do it if we give them the money. That's why I'm wondering whether there should be some discussion this time around about that. Down to 30 seconds. Do you think they'll just give in? Airlines, everybody else, cruise industry, everybody's going to get bailed out? Professor?
My guess is that the people running this government can't think like this. They're used to putting the private sector first. Profit is the key to getting to heaven, and they're going to bail out the top and believe, as always, that it'll trickle down to all the rest of us. That's a mistake.
Where's FDR when you need him now? Thanks so much. Professor Richard Wolff, I appreciate your time. Thanks for being a guest.
Thank you.
There it is, man. You heard it from out of the horse's mouth, man. Let me go back to this. I'm gonna play this one more time because this thing is getting real, man.
600 here in New York City alone.
Hold on.
Known all along this was going to get worse, especially as more people are tested, and it certainly has. In some states and cities, the running tally of people infected by coronavirus has doubled. Over 3,600 here in New York City alone. And as each day passes, some of the things we thought we knew about this virus have changed, like the risk to younger patients. A lot of what we're going to tell you tonight may feel overwhelming, but there is progress on some fronts, including the search for treatments. Our team is ready to go with the latest. We start with Miguel Almaguer.
Tonight, inside intensive care units across the country, the CDC says nearly half of all coronavirus patients fighting for their lives are younger than 65. While often deadly for the elderly, the virus is now taking more lives of those who are not senior citizens. The young not only catching the illness at higher and higher rates, but also spreading it.
Oh, on the worst day, it was, it was a 10. It was rough.
Matt Schulte has had the virus for over a week.
It feels like my lungs have fluid in them. The air feels thin, and it just feels very heavy on my chest.
As officials in Washington state scramble to build a 200-bed hospital on a soccer field, the number of coronavirus cases nationwide is hitting yet another milestone, climbing to over 13,000. More than half the cases in the country come from just 10 counties across 3 states, New York, Washington, and California.
The number of test positives is increasing.
Today at the White House, a call for social media influencers to warn the young about the virus. The governor of Maryland with a more pointed message amid spring break scenes like these.
If you are engaged in this type of activity, you are in violation of state law and you are endangering the lives of your fellow Marylanders.
With the State Department making an unprecedented move, telling Americans not to travel abroad, Carnival Cruise Lines is offering their ships to serve as floating hospitals to relieve stress on a burdened onshore medical system. Now, the first two members of Congress, Mario Diaz-Balart and Ben McAdams, have tested positive, while in New Jersey, so have 7 members of the Fusco family. 73-year-old Grace died just hours after her son and 5 days after her daughter. Cases in neighboring New York are skyrocketing.
Nobody can tell you when this is going to end. Nobody can say 2 months, 4 months, 9 months. Nobody.
Amid ghostly scenes like this around Boston, as Americans heed warnings to stay away from others, the U.S. Census is suspending field operations, while the CDC suggested live streaming funerals to avoid crowds. The National Guard now deployed to over half the country.
With COVID-19, it's like we have 54 separate hurricanes in every state, territory, and the District of Columbia.
Tonight, our nation fighting the virus and fear as both spread across the country.
This is 2 Ezra, chapter 16, verse 19. Behold, famine and plague, tribulation and anguish are sent as scourges for amendment. The Lord is punishing 2/3 for their wickedness. Why? Because they would not turn, man. They would not repent, convert, and be healed, man. Right? Convert with faith, with truth, man. Okay? They would not convert to this truth, man. So what? It said, behold, famine and plague, tribulation and anguish are sent as scourges for amendment. Scourges mean what, man? To be chastised, man. To be chastened, man. But for all these, they shall not turn from their wickedness, nor be always mindful of the scourges. That's what the Lord said in Isaiah 1. Why should he stricken you any more? You revolt more and more. The whole head is sick. Why should he stricken you any more? Why should he punish you any more? You are not going to, hey. And that's how cold the Lord is, man. You see the judgment. Hey, but the 1/3 going to see it and be like, hey, they looking for repentance, man. It's only for the repentance of the elect, man. The hopeful elect. 2/3 don't care, man. Why? Because they think it's a game. Normative bias. They think it's going to get back normal and everything is going to be okay. Well, guess what? These are just the beginnings of sorrows. 2 Ezra 16:18. The beginning of sorrows and great mournings. The beginning of famine and great death. The beginning of wars, and the powers shall stand in fear. The elites, the powers shall stand in fear. The beginnings of evils. What shall I do when these evils shall come? What? Call on the name of Yahweh Shema Shah. It was an earthquake. I forgot where it was at. Croatia. It said over 140 years, the worst one ever, man. In the midst of this pandemic. Hey, so just want to do a little update. I seen a couple articles. Lord willing is edifying. Got to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh. Bahashim Yahweh Shah. Bahashim Rikah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, who teach well. And a sincere salutation to all the Akim pushing the truth and believing this truth throughout the 4 winds of the earth, the entire world. Waking up the hopeful elect. And shalom to the Akwaf who are listening and learning. The few sisters who are listening and learning. Lord willing is edifying. So next time I say shalom, this thing is going to get worse. Why? Because the Lord is putting spirit on these devils to do such of great works of Yahweh, man. This is the work of Yahweh Bashim Habashah. And it's going to get worse. Hey, Lord willing edifying. Till next time I say shalom. This is death, destruction, and economic collapse.